program manager for the African Gender Institute, which is based at UCT. The African Gender Institute sits within collaboration with the Department of African Feminist Studies. I'm also standing here as a co-founder and curator of the Queer Feminist Film Festival, so I'm super excited for the program today. We will have a lot of multimedia, storytelling, and other amazing pieces that will be shared today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Professor Benita Moorman, who is the head of Department of the African Feminist Studies, to please do us the honor of welcoming us into the space and opening the event for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Zina. Yes, so as Zina has introduced me, I'm Benita Moorman. I'm the HOD, Head of Department of African Feminist Studies and HAI, African Gender Institute. So I was thinking, like, what do you actually say in a welcome on a day like today, right? This is supposed to be naturally our month. African Feminist Studies, African Gender Institute, Women's Month. It's your thing to do. It's your thing to deal with, Benita, right? African Feminist Studies, you should be happy. You should be celebrating. It's your day. It's a day of recognition, of a month of recognition of the many contributions that women have made over the years. And of course, it's commemoration of 1956. But somehow I cannot shake the reluctance and caution around August the 9th, as well as Women's Month in South Africa. And so I thought it's important just to share a little bit of that with you, so that to know that we stand here, yes, in commemoration of August the 9th and 1956 Women's March, and the many battles and fights and gains that women have made over the years in South Africa, continentally, and also, of course, globally. But it's also a recognition of the levels of violence that are unabated against all women in the country, right, and beyond the country as well. So the structural forms of violence, domestic violence, IPV, rape, economic forms of violence that we still experience as women across the country and across the continent. I'm also reluctant because of the kind of commercialization of Women's Day. Right? We get tagged little goodie bags. Here's your Women's Day goodie bag with 3 little writing pad. Really? Really? Is that what Women's Day is about? Sometimes we'll have to recently heard somebody say, oh, it's just another Mother's Day. I'm like, what? Just another Mother's Day? Because that's how it's being commercialized in the country. Right? It's just a day to celebrate women, regardless of the ongoing violence that continues, regardless of any contribution to ending forms of violence, regardless of people just carrying on as if it's just another day. Disregarding news reports, disregarding media, disregarding the statistics that is the evidence of the complicated and violent and brutal context that we still struggle and try to survive. And so, as part of that reluctance and caution, that lead me to the ambivalence about what it means to celebrate women and on or during this month in particular. Of course, I don't every day, right? So just celebrating myself and everybody around me. That has continued to show me what it means to be and continue to fight against oppressive systems. To look at what is resistance, what does it mean to stand up for oneself, what does it mean to work with people, what does it mean to work through partnerships, what does it mean to recognize all of us have different complexities, our different layers, our different colors, our different shapes and sizes. What does it mean to really recognize each other? And so I'm happy to be here, to be in partnership with an organization, to say, thank you, Tula. So to be in partnership with this organization, as well as, of course, our transformation committee, our faculty, some of our guests, I know somebody like Elizabeth for 20, 30 years, and to have different women that's located in different places at UCT here today. Right? I see students, I see some of the workers who help us all the time, some of the academics and stuff. So it's really, I'm happy that we're in this kind of way here today. And for us to continue to reflect on the challenges and the struggles, because it's not only about South African women. Women's Month, and we would say, can never only be about South African women. It is an absolute, I think, undermining of the 1956 March, if we think it's only about South African women. And so it's an important time, we know in the past couple of months, and it's not that it's new, but the levels of violence against migrant women, the levels of violence against refugees, asylum seekers, immigrant women. We know those levels of violence, and so it's important that we acknowledge that, and that when we talk about Women's Month in South Africa, it's not only about South African women. So on that, as a cautionary tale, welcome to Women's Day at UCT.
Thank you so much, Prof. I now have the privilege to introduce us, for those who may not know, the coordinator of Tusimame Wanawake, Dalulo George. Please join us.
Good morning, colleagues, and Tusimame Wanawake is one of the programs. It's the migrant and refugee, asylum seeker, and undocumented migrant women living in South Africa. And what we do is we try to, amplify the voices of the migrant women, advocate for the migrant women, help them to access accurate information because their struggles are extreme and they're real. First of all, before I continue my remarks, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Professor Ala Al-Qura and all the people in UCT who are gathered here today, because we were told that nobody wanted to see refugee women here today, and I'm glad that you honored our invitation. So thank you for coming. And I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of some of our colleagues, our professional colleagues and the partners, stakeholders from the Zella Care Center from Weinberg. So they're here with the National Prosecuting Authorities and Advocate SAS, and Dr. Edwin. And I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of the Director of SAFI, South African Family and Faith Institution, I believe, Dr. Elizabeth Peterson Horn. And of course, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of my Director, Mr. Zoe Nkongolo, our Big Daddy in the house. So thank you, sir, for being here. And I'd like to welcome you all for being here. Thank you so much for coming here. This month marks exactly 70 years since 20,000 women from all races came together and marched to the Union buildings in Pretoria. And why were they marching? They were marching to protest the apartheid regime oppressive pass laws, right? Women couldn't, people, not just women, people couldn't access spaces. Why? Because of a single document. They were dehumanized because of a single document. Unfortunately, 70 years later, women are still being victimized by vigilante groups who are demanding documentation, self-proclaimed immigration officers and law enforcement officers who prowl around neighborhoods looking for desperate and innocent people who have done nothing wrong other than trying to put food on their table, other than trying to give themselves a sense of human dignity. And unfortunately, these people do not discriminate between a documented or an undocumented foreigner. They just see someone who maybe doesn't speak Zulu. They see someone who is dark in complexion, and unfortunately there are many South African locals who are dark in complexion. There are many South African locals who don't speak Zulu. In fact, I met a lawyer who was accused of, who was being pursued, and people didn't know that he was a Songa man because he was very, very dark as a Nigerian. Now, what has happened is people have become victims in the societies where they sought refuge. Now, there's nobody really who's here because they just want to come and be a nuisance to anyone else's society. People are fleeing real problems. They're fleeing political violence. One of the women who will be here today, she'll be nameless. 2 of her brothers were killed because of their political inclinations. Some women are fleeing extreme cases of gender-based violence. And in case you don't know, in places like the east of DRC, which is Goma, there is this violence between the mercenaries, the Rwandans, the DRC people, and it's all over resources. Now what happens is, the women are just, like the story of a woman that someone just knocked on her door, and she opened her door, and there were bands of rebels waiting outside. And they took her, they killed her, shot her husband immediately, and took her into the forest and raped her continuously for several months until she got pregnant. Now when she got pregnant, they kicked her out of their forest, and she came home only to meet the family of her husband asking, "What did you do with our son? Who is this child? Who is this child who you have appeared with? Who is this child?" So they said, "No, the only thing that we can do is we will kill the child." Now what mother wants her children killed? Even if they were products of rape, there are very few women that are that cold-hearted. Anyway, the woman escapes with her child, and the family pursues her. And not only do they want to murder the child, they want to murder the child in the most disgusting way. They want to perform sexual acts on babies, to suck certain parts of male bodies so that the child can die. And for them, it's a ritual thing. So such women sometimes flee these extreme conditions to South Africa, because when they run to one village, they're pursued there. When they run to another village, they're there. And they say, "Look, what's the best thing to do? We will run to South Africa." Some people are just fleeing because their husband got into trouble and they had to follow the husband. Some people are fleeing because they're looking for work. Nobody flees just because they want to. They flee because staying at home became impossible. Unfortunately, they arrive here in a beautiful country, and I want to really acknowledge the fact that South Africans as a people are not xenophobic. South Africa has been generous, they've been good, they've welcomed people with open arms. But there are a few people that pit African brothers against one another and go against the principles of Ubuntu, which we heard about when we came to this country. And now we find ourselves in a situation, and we're going to give some few information about a little survey, because that's on the program, about what we have seen as the aftermath of some of these protests. Now, extreme things have happened. People have fled in several numbers, hundreds of thousands of people. And it's even showing up in our economy, because now we're hearing of cases where schools in Eastern Cape have to be closed down because the enrollments in some of the schools have become extremely low, and those schools are no longer sustainable. Why? Because migrant people have left. Grandmothers who had as their pension plan, their retirement plan, they built 2 or 3 rooms, 6 rooms, and they said, "We will feed ourselves in the old age." And the Zimbabwean or the Malawian who cannot afford to pay for a flat in Parklands or Rondebosch can at least afford to rent a room for 1.5. And Gogo gets her money every end of the month full, because we know that if you lose your accommodation, getting a new place is very difficult, because many people don't have IDs and proof of payments and all sorts of documentation that accompanies renting a simple space. So Gogo has lost out, the renter has lost out, his job has been compromised, he's been kicked out of his work, his bank account has been closed, and many times the real culprit is the Department of Home Affairs. Because there are very few people that want to be illegal, because we know the importance of that document. We understand. Affairs can decide. You find the man is in a family of 5, the man has his document, and many women are undocumented, wives of these men. They have 3 children, 1 is undocumented and 2 are documented. And they create and perpetuate the confusion that we see on ground. And what happens is, you can't really go back because you're kind of like having hope that this person is going to eventually, this situation is going to get sorted out eventually. You understand? But it's not really getting sorted out. So when you try for a couple of years, and I will tell you, even as a personal experience, for me who is even relatively educated and I know generally some of the things about the situation, it took 5 years to renew. My husband is a permanent resident, my children are permanent residents, but for some reason, Home Affairs continues to deny my own application. They continued. And then 5 years down the line, they finally gave me a temporary residence, which was supposed to be valid for 2 years, but they had kept it in their offices for 1 year. So I only had a year and a half. And that is the story of most of the women. So in an attempt to try and validate themselves, they go to, someone tells them, oh, there's this man around the corner. He can help you with your documents. And this man around the corner charges 25,000 rands. And they run around, they raise loans, they work hard, they deny themselves. They raise 25,000 rands only for them to get a fake document. So, we have a big problem in our hands, which we at some point in time. Now, I want you to think, it's nice when you sit in your country, you don't understand all these nuances, you don't understand the realities of these things. But many of us here were students. You may find yourself in someone else's country. You may find yourself in America, in the UK, in Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. You may find yourself somewhere. And I want you to put yourself in the position of someone who is trying to do the right thing. You looked around in South Africa, the circumstances were not too perfect for you, but you decided to make the trip and leave your comfort zone, leave your bride, leave the Table Mountain, leave the beaches, and leave sea points, the promenade, and you find yourself in this strange land. I'll close now, but one of the things that we've done in South Africa is we have partnered with many, many South African organizations. And we're not just a movement of migrant and African women anymore. We have included a lot of South African women in our programs. Why? Because our struggles are exactly the same. We struggle with gender-based violence. We struggle with a lack of skills, a lack of proper information, a lack of economic empowerment. We struggle on several fronts. And so, because of that, we said that we want to move together with our South African sisters. We want to rise together. And so now we've done a lot of skills sharing. We've done a lot of cohesion events in which we celebrate Africa Day, in which we go dance and tie our dukes and eat rice the way you cook it in your specific country. And we've got some of our products from the skills sharing and the culture climate change eco hub which we held. You can find some of them at the back, and I welcome you to continue to enjoy this event. Thank you very much.
Invite us just to also hold ourselves, just a moment to take a breath, It's a lot. There's many intersecting struggles, there's many intersecting forms of violence. So thank you so much, Rulo, for sharing the work that you are doing across your movement with us. I now want to introduce and welcome another colleague, by the name of Andiswa Mefengu from UCT, Senior Lecturer and Head of the Department of Knowledge and Information Stewardship. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Our Program Director, Zina Scarlett, Associate Professor Benita Moman, Ms. Choli George, and also the Tusimami Wanawake family, and the director here is also around. Our Deputy Dean, Professor Jayaraju. I know we also have other Deputy Deans that are joining us this afternoon. Colleagues from the Faculty of Humanities, fellow staff, from UCT students, and above all, the women whose stories we're here to honor. Good afternoon, Habari, Mulweni. I want to begin with the word that many of us care deeply about, and today, it's also been mentioned, Ubuntu. And we sometimes take it for granted that a person is a person through other people. And we refer to Ubuntu at times generally, we put it here and there, it's like a slogan, especially in the academic, whereas across the border with a child on her back and her life in a single bag, rebuilding her dignity against a backdrop of a country that is still wrestling with its own historical wounds. So I stand before you today as a member of staff at UCT, but above all, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm someone who firmly believes that knowledge, lived experiences cannot be separated from justice. We stand for social justice more than anything. So then allow me a few minutes to just briefly introduce my own scholarship and where I come from as a staff member at UCT. So my work is at the intersection of people and information. I'm a librarian by professional but turned academic. And as in our space, we look at how is knowledge shaped and who gets to shape what we read. Whose stories do we hear? Whose stories are magnified? Whose stories are celebrated, highlighted by the media and different spaces? And also whose stories are preserved for generations to come? Whose stories do we hear about? Is it the European and Eurocentric stories rather than the African migrant and African women stories? Terrain is far from neutral, it is not neutral, and I think that's why we're standing in these spaces, that's why we advocate as institutions and knowledge systems. They carry a long history of deciding whose lived reality counts. Are they spoken to? We speak about them, we talk about them in different spaces rather than talking and speaking with them. Their lived experiences are at times often treated as raw material, which we extract, rather than knowledge to be honored and celebrated. And I think that's why we gather in here to commemorate those stories that at times do not make it to the front pages of the newspapers and the global spaces. But also I am aware that today there's a booklet that is being launched, and I think this is also why today matters in terms of documenting. When migrants women's own words, they are accounts of violence, accounts of survival authored by them, rather than someone telling their stories as if they're not in the room. And I believe that is epistemic justice. That is Ubuntu in praxis, which speaks in our country's history. So that, I think this is where social justice, Ubuntu, and also uplifting women's voices meet mostly clearly. Social justice is not just about redistributing resources. A lot of projects would get money thrown at them, but also at times, and this is important, we can never take the resources for granted, but also it goes beyond just the resources, it's also about redistributing credibility. So whose account is believed when we tell women's stories, whose pain is taken seriously, and also whose joy, whose resourcefulness and skills is celebrated rather than overlooked. And when we elevate the poetry, the sketches, the testimonies, and also the student voices that we will hear today, the voices of migrant women, as you will hear later, we engage in a quiet and transformative work of reshaping who gets to write public record and what stories the next generations will actually hear about. So, to honor the spirit of this gathering, I think we must speak radically. I think Benita spoke about this also just honestly around Afrophobia. I think it remains an unhealed wound in this country. it is all too easy to speak about unity in abstract, while, outside these walls, a lot of women, migrant women, they endure suspicion, they endure violence and exclusion. And I think in the spirit of Ubuntu, it requires more of us. It requires us to go beyond the warm, fuzzy, polite and rhetoric conversations that we have sometimes in the spaces. It demands for us a rigorous self-examination. It says, how do I, as a head of department, how do I, as a department at UCT, in our classes, as students, as lecturers, students, so we've heard that you are already doing that work, looking at how do we, as institutions, how do we partner, how do we advocate, how do we create platforms, mentorship and safety for women and migrant women in different spaces from where we are at. So I think more than anything, solidarity that stops at the door of the gallery and in our spaces is not yet Ubuntu. Ubuntu is ongoing, it's unfinished work, it is hard work. We can't take it for granted. Today, as we screen the different stories and we hear, listen to sketches depicting the struggle of migrant women, as we hear poems, we read aloud, as we witness the booklet launch, I invite all of us to receive these letters and performances for our benefit and to entertain us, but as an invitation. An invitation to keep listening after we leave this room. An invitation to ask what solidarity looks like in practice. An invitation to make sure that women's voices, African women's voices, migrant women's voices are not only uplifted today, but sustained, funded, and believed all year round in everything that we do. And also to Tusimami Wake and every woman whose story will be told this afternoon. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for trusting us with your experiences. You are not being spoken about today, you are speaking. And that itself is an act of justice. Ngiyabonga inkosi asante.
And the fact that migrant women's stories are being told by migrant women for migrant women is powerful, especially within a space like a UCT on this day. So thank you for raising that and innovating that very important fact.
But all the time when she's speaking, said, I want to be like you, my grandmother. And as I said, you will do it, be strong. But today is another day. I just want to greet special mamas, special daughters, special sisters. There's something inside, said, talk because you're a woman. There's something that's stroking you. There is something that can say something, that someone should get to say it. So say it loud. Like at UCT as a cleaner. I'm proud of being at UCT as a cleaner. Because others, they undermine us. You are a cleaner, but you want to knock in all doors at UCT. You can't go to the VC. You can't go to the people that they are not on the status. But today, you guys are giving me a hard job. Because I want you guys, as Usisi was saying, what do you call it? She said, all women, doesn't matter you are from South Africa, you are from outside South Africa. I remember the day of Ufizma's fall. There were group of students, including why you can't, as a women can stand together. Just call everyone and hold hands with those people from outside of South Africa. Because the women is women. You can't change a woman. A woman's got a womb. It's got that feeling of when you are giving birth to the child. You are different to someone who doesn't have a womb. So because we do have a womb, we do have that thing. Why we don't have a respect for each other? Give each other. Just listen to each other. To each woman. Doesn't matter. This woman is coming from starting from the bush or from where. But that woman, give that woman a respect. Because we don't know what is in that woman. That woman can help you tomorrow. That woman can give you power. Because sometimes here we are quiet because we don't know where to go. But there are women you are given that time, you have to stand up. You have to raise your voice. Not only for South Africans, but for other women outside. When we feel that pain of giving back, they also feel that pain. When they feel pain of being LGBT, they also feel the same problem. We are women, the really women. We have to stand together and hold hands for business, for whatever training you will get from other people outside South Africa. I know there are people, they do bigger things because they received, they were taught by people that are coming from out of South Africa. But today, you have to come out of the bush. You have to stand up. You have to rise as a woman at UCT. Especially for my case at UCT. I know there is a long walk for me at UCT. I've got more than 15 years working. But before I worked for UCT, I was working for a company, Supercare, and I was struggling as a woman at UCT. There was a time when they don't want you to say anything. You can't complain. You have to keep quiet. They put a plaster on your mouth, keep quiet. Be silent. It was not from Supercare. And when we were at UCT, when we sourced, we fought for that together with the students. When we were at UCT, we were happy as if there would be something that is going, there will be a big change. No. It's worth more than before. Today you can't just go and say, I'm complaining about my department as a woman. I feel like someone is oppressing me, someone don't want me to say this. I can't complain of the way they are treating me. I can't complain because we feel like we are victimized by our department. I can't just go and raise that to the management of UCT. The door is closed for you. We are living in that situation. Why? I think the students at UCT, together with workers and other professors, I'm asking today, let's stand together. I know we are not in your position as professors and the lecturers, but just listen to our voices. When we are crying, just listen. It's not only the other people from out of South Africa that are crying. We are crying while we are here in South Africa. Every day. We are sick because of the oppression. Every day. We are here just because we want to put something on the table for our grandchildren. We are here to put something on the table for our grandchildren. Like now, I'm 60-something years. I'm very old, but I'm still working. I'm still fighting at UCT. I'm still suffering. I'm still oppressed at UCT. But I think the students, they must open something. They must do anything that can help us as workers at UCT. The professors, I know you guys, you can do something. Something that everybody can just say, and there are people that are crying at UCT. But we must be strong. Because sometimes there's something that is strong in us. Let's not feel like no one can stop us. I do have that power. There's something in me that says, don't keep quiet. They tried. Even now, when I'm standing here, there are people they try to say, no, you have to follow procedure. You have to follow policies of UCT. Why? But tomorrow they call me, I'm part of the community at UCT. But there are things that I can't even raise. When I feel like, no, I'm in a corner, are doors that are closed for all workers at the city. There are people that are standing there and said, you can't go anywhere. We tried, I don't know how many doors. As a woman at the city. And you guys, you are in those social medias and all that stuff. Also, you can write everything just to say to your friend, to say to your mother, to say to your sister, stop victimizing the people that are coming from outside. That woman's got a womb, like your mother. That woman can cry like you, as a mother. I know how to cry. I've got different pains at work.
And like Zika said, I'm coming in from the African Feminist Studies Department. I'm currently doing my master's in gender transformation. And it's really an honor to be here. Thank you to Simame Wanawake, thank you to the Transformation Committee, thank you to AFS as always, and thank you for inviting me to reflect with you today. And I was asked to speak on behalf of the department, but also bring some of my research and lived experiences to this gathering. I am Kenyan, and like many Kenyan families, their lives were shaped by movement. So they eventually migrated to Nairobi in search of work and opportunity. My siblings were born and raised in different towns across central and southern Kenya, while I was the first one to be born in Nairobi shortly after my parents relocated there. So I also think about their movement. The time it was happening in the 80s and 90s within the context of rural to urban migration in Kenya and the ways in which their movement and their migration was also connected to Kenya's colonial history and then even history in which that country has also developed. During the colonial period, the economic development was concentrated in what was known as White Highlands, where commercial agriculture and a small number of towns became these centers of urbanization, and they depended heavily on a large supply of sort of cheap African migrant labor drawn from African reserves. So this is also a story about colonialism, this is also a story about histories, and this is also a story about how certain historical patterns continue to shape an educational grant. And once again, I found myself learning how to first learn a new language and articulate myself in that new language. To inhabit a new space, I encountered racial and gendered stigma while also navigating what it meant to move through the space as a racialized queer person. And I was encountering these identities in sort of new ways that I hadn't encountered them before, and in a very different social and political context as well. So looking back, I also recognize how particular my own migration story is. And I've been fortunate enough that my movement across borders has also largely happened through education. I've crossed borders through institutions that have provided me with the documentation, the resources, the networks, and the pathways through which I could move with sort of a greater degree of security. But this security wasn't always something that protected me from the different stops that I encountered, the random police checks, being followed around in stores, being questioned where you're from constantly, the long waits at bureaucratic passport offices where you're moving in between different stages of legality and illegality. For anyone who's dealt with foreign systems or visa requirements, I remember being a student and going into the country on a student visa, and you're only given a visa for 3 months, and you must up in time. You are undocumented or you are illegal, and you're moving between these different configurations of being a legal and illegal person, while still dealing with the other things that come with that. So access to housing, access to scholarships. If your fund is dependent on whether or not you're a student at a certain institution, this is also dependent on whether you have the papers for it. So that was also an experience in itself, and I recognize that the experience of many migrant women whose movements are shaped by economic necessity, displacement, family responsibilities, precarious documentation, or very limited choices. And I think holding that difference has been important to my own experience and my own work. And so it has pushed me to ask how the conditions under which we migrate, including education, documentation, access to institutional support, how all of these shape what becomes possible once we arrive. And it has also made me wary of speaking about the gendered migrant experience as though there's only one. So this also informed my research while in Spain, where I focused on Black, African, and Afro-descendant migrant women and their gendered geographies of migration ever captured in these statistics or forms of enumeration. And something that I was curious about was what these figures reveal beyond these numbers that we read on paper. And they never tell us about the prolonged waits for asylum decisions. They never tell us about the employment opportunities that delay financial independence. And they never tell us about the vulnerabilities faced by women who migrated to meet the demand for low-skilled labor in other countries. They tell us little about the labor and sexual harassment. They tell us little about the absence of support networks and resources. Through questions of African feminism, I also started to ask how race, gender, sexuality, and disability, as well as these varying degrees of migration status, shape the spaces that women could access. Where do we feel safe? Where do we work? Where do we build relationships? Where do we seek support? Where do you feel that you belong? And within the South African context, these questions have remained the same, and they have also shifted in different ways for me. And while public commentary has largely approached Afrophobia through the political economy of migration and through unemployment, through criminality, through the informal economy, I'm curious about sort of the historical structures and conditions that continue to make African foreignness an issue and why within South African political discourse. And so these questions have emerged even more clearly for me while working through the department, through my supervisors, and through the discussions that we often have within African feminist thought. And so when I read through the work that Tusimama Wanawake does and the women that it often thinks alongside and works with, these questions came up for me as a reminder. And for some women, the border continues to be present through documentation, through expired permits, through long bureaucratic processes, through uncertainty around one's legal status. For others, the border continues to appear through work, through exploitation, through wage theft, through insecure employment. For others, the border appears through language, through housing, through access. And so there's all of these different points in which the border continues to appear and reappear and to be constructed and reconstructed. And one of the biggest challenges I encountered in my work was also the lack of information around race and gender, particularly when it comes to migration. And the migrant woman continues to be read in very traditional ways, where the story starts and ends with a journey or process of migration and this constant reduction to statistics, or this constant relegation to statistics. And when I was working within a department that wanted this in primarily policy outputs, there was this constant recourse to produce numbers or to justify this in ways that were rational or economic or calculated. And so there's very little information as to what information do these people bring, these communities, what information do we bring as migrants to this space, what relationships are we creating, what care networks are we sustaining, what cultures are we sharing, and what political questions do migration and issues of gendered migration force us to deal with. I think I find myself now thinking particularly within South Africa. There's an article recently that spoke from the perspective of a queer migrant in South Africa who said that sending us back to our country is sending us to death. And it forced me to think about what migration policy even means when the person being discussed is just seeking the possibility to be alive and to exist. So the African feminist principles remind me that the nation state, we have to think beyond the nation state. It cannot be treated as the natural horizon of emancipation. And the very structures that organized colonialism and militarization and patriarchy and capitalism are themselves the ones that continue to reemerge today in the way we talk about migration, the way we talk about our neighbor, and the way we talk about the woman who sells fruits at the fruit vendor across the street. These border logics continue to reappear, they continue to reemerge, and I find myself asking how we can think about migration beyond just movement, who gets to belong, under what conditions, what ways do borders continue to organize our own ideas of belonging, and what would it mean to build forms of African solidarity that do not reproduce the very borders that we claim to be challenging. And one of the ways that I have been thinking about these questions is through feminism and feminist genealogies of Pan-African organizing that continue to challenge these ideas, these nationalist ideas, and how Afrophobia continues to emerge through histories of Pan-Africanism, to the failures of Pan-Africanism today, and how we can re-articulate these questions in terms of solidarity and building those transnational networks that can help us figure out why migration continues to be a problem today. Yeah, so thank you for listening.
Everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Moweni Dumela. Ndeunu, that means good afternoon, Igbo. My name is Miriam Ogochinyere Emetushe, and it is an absolute honor to be here today, speaking with you, and to have an opportunity to not just share a little bit about myself and my research, but also just my story. When I was presented with the opportunity to speak today, I got to thinking about the women in my life, particularly my grandmothers. They're both no longer with me, but I found myself wondering what they think of me now if they had to see me today. Would they be proud? Would they be amazed? Or would they look at me and say, Miriam, sit down somewhere? What would they say? My maternal grandmother's name was Lolo Ezenwani. She was my first representation of an industrious woman. I remember watching her count money, be stern when she had to be, navigate the hustle and bustle of the market, and still tend to me. My 13-year-old brain couldn't comprehend how she managed all of it. I was in awe of her. My maternal grandmother came down. She worked as a domestic worker. My mother actually told me a story about how my grandmother's boss lived in Rondebosch and actually studied here at UCT. I never got to meet my maternal grandmother, but my mother has never, and even some of the old wives' tales and herbal remedies my mom recommends every time I get sick. Her legacy lives on. My grandmother labored in other people's households whilst building and caring for her own. Their lives looked very different from mine. Perhaps they could have never imagined that they'd have a grandchild standing here today at UCT, speaking about African folklore that could only be passed down by Igbo people themselves. And from that, I only know the story of Igbo resilience. My father has always reminded me who I am, who my people are, and how hard we have to fight to remain a people, to preserve our culture and our traditions, and to cement our place in Nigeria. It was simply never an option to give up. Now, I do not wish to romanticize resilience, but I would like to ask, what does it mean to celebrate the resilience of African women without celebrating the conditions that force them to become resilient in the first place? Throughout my journey has come to mean fighting back, adapting, creating, negotiating, building networks of care, and refusing to be erased. Constantly reimagining something beyond what has been handed to us. So when I speak about resilience, I'm not speaking about this abstract quality that African women just have. I'm speaking about something that I have inherited, something I've witnessed, and something I see being continually remade. My grandmothers negotiated their families, migration, race, gender, care, economic insecurity, belonging, but more importantly, they negotiated their own personhood. They negotiated the world that was available to them, and now I am negotiating my own, and so are the people who form part of my research. The circumstances of the times may have changed, but the negotiating continues. It became very clear to me that my research needed to shift away from seeing African women only as victims of these precarious circumstances, but it instead needed to ask, what are they doing against it, beyond it? My research is looking at how Nigerian migrant gendered subjects negotiate everyday survival and informal healthcare practices in Cape Town. And I think that the word negotiate has become increasingly important to me, because I have come to realize that negotiation is not simply something that migrants do as soon as they arrive somewhere. It's something that many of us are constantly doing in relation to the world that we inhabit. And perhaps I understand this particularly personally because I was born in South Africa, home, while also carrying a Nigerian and specifically Igbo identity. What does it mean to have a lineage that crosses borders, oceans, and histories? What does it mean to be a young child growing up in Pretoria and being made fun of for your very Nigerian middle name and surname? What does it mean when the fear that is made to stick to the migrant body starts taking form in humans that are still so very young? And more often than not, I find myself asking a very simple question. Why don't I get to just be? Why must I explain where I come from in order to explain why I belong here? Why must my belonging always be something that I have to prove? And don't get me wrong, I don't think that my multiplicity, I am the product of all these histories, and I should not have to make one disappear in order to make another one acceptable. And I think this is the part of what brought me to the research that I'm doing. Because when I think about Nigerian migrants in Cape Town, I'm not interested only in the ways in which they're experiencing exclusion. I'm interested in what they're doing within, against, and beyond those circumstances. What happens when people are living in a place where they're Who are they turning to? How are they building networks of support? This is where I think the idea of resilience becomes more complicated, because it is very easy to look at African women and say, oh, look how resilient they are. But I think we must also ask, why is there a danger in celebrating resilience without asking questions about the structures that make resilience necessary? If a woman has to find alternative ways of accessing healthcare because hospitals and clinics are not meeting her needs, I don't only want to celebrate the fact that she found another way, I want to ask what made that other way necessary. If a migrant woman has to rely on community networks for care, I want to understand the strength and the knowledge that are contained within that so hard to simply live. For me, this is where African feminist scholarship becomes so important. It allows us to look beyond the idea of African women as passive victims of violence, poverty, migration, or exclusion. It asks us to see women as people who are constantly negotiating, making decisions, creating possibilities, and imagining something beyond what was handed to them. And I think this is what I mean when I talk about resilience. It's not simply enduring. It is negotiating your place in a world that may not always make room for you. It is the decision to keep becoming. I will never know what my grandmothers would have thought about who I've become. But what I do know is that I did not arrive here alone. Something beyond what I have been given. I call on them often. I ask them to guide me, to keep me on the right path, and to remind me of where I come from. And so when I stand here today, I don't see myself as an individual who just arrived here through my own efforts. I see myself as part of a much longer story. A story of women who worked, cared, built, adapted, resisted, who kept on going. And now it is my turn to carry something forward, not because I owe the world resilience, but because I have inherited the possibility that there is more. And perhaps that's what I want to leave us with today, is that we are not simply inheriting survival, we are inheriting the possibility of something beyond survival. I'm here because they were here, and I'm no longer asking for permission to belong. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our valued partners, and the movement has been a very strong mentor side by side. So all this that happened in 4 years, we can trace a lot of it to Rural Women's Assembly. And also while we were sitting, the director for Kweso, who is also a member of our steering committee, walked in, and I saw Dr. Faisal Garba from the University of Cape Town. I can't see him anymore. He comes in and goes out, but I'd like to acknowledge their presence here. And I saw their support from Rural Women's Assembly. Today we stand in solidarity with Africa Unite as you create space to reflect on the lived experiences of women and migrant women in South Africa. Women continue to face poverty, gender-based violence, unemployment, xenophobia, discrimination, and many forms of inequality. Yet, women remain strong organizers, caregivers, farmers, workers, and community leaders. May this Women's Day gathering strengthen solidarity, understanding, and unity among women, regardless of where we come from. Together, we can build resilient communities where every woman is treated with dignity, safety, and respect. Our struggles may differ, but our fight for dignity and justice unites us all. A luta continua. Viva Africa Unite, viva, from all Rural Women Assembly. To Simami Wanawake, viva. Viva. Now we really need to give this one a lot of oomph. Viva all women, viva! Viva! Ask it, where are our actors? Please come. Okay. I will be. And I'm so excited to see another Nigerian in this space. We have a very bad reputation in South Africa. and Chikmani all over the world. But I'm not ashamed of being a Nigerian. I'm a proud Nigerian, making Nigeria proud. And I'm so excited to see another young, proud Nigerian. And believe me, I know a lot about Igbo culture. I'm not Igbo, but I understand you guys. Your grandmother would be proud because you have stood up. Nigerian women were not docile. We stand up, we're aggressive, we're in your face, we're everywhere, and I'm excited to see that you're carrying on that legacy. So thank you. Thank you, Samantha, as well, for speaking on behalf of queer Africans. It takes a lot of courage to do that. I thank everyone here. I wish everyone could speak because we have some powerful women speakers here, but UCT will kick us out at 3. So I'm excited to be here, but I am not going to be presenting the findings of the booklet. We've been working hard analyzing, but the data is more complex than we realize. So we're going to be giving our findings, our preliminary findings. So the actual booklet is not here, but we've summarized a few of the things that have emerged. Now, before I hand over to the lady who will actually be presenting those findings, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Ms. Leslie Ann Foster, who is the director of Masimanyane Women's Rights International. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Skihanda Kopo, I hope I pronounced it right, who is a human rights defender and Gender and Sexuality Alliance Director, I assume? Yes. And I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of Ms. Fortunate Shingange, who is the country representative of the International Women's Peace Group. So before we continue, I'd like to invite Ms. Marie-Claire Shizala. She's a young refugee lady, lovely, brilliant lady who assisted with this preliminary discussion. So when technology was teaching me, showing me flames, Marie-Claire came to the rescue. So please listen, she's got some findings for you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. So today I'm going to speak at my slowest because Mr. Zoe keeps saying that I speak too fast. So if I'm going too fast, just like put a thumbs up and I know I'm going too fast. Okay. So it is a privilege to share some of the findings from the research that was being conducted by the Tusimame women on the women's perspective and experiences of immigration and asylum in South Africa. Before I share these findings, I would like to briefly situate the research within the context in which migrant and refugee women are currently living. Over the past few years, South Africa has witnessed an increased organized anti-migration movement. Groups such as the Operation Tudula played a significant role in popularizing the narratives that blame foreign nationals for challenges such as unemployment, crime, and poor service delivery in South Africa. During the previous election, we saw political parties such as the Patriotic Alliance also became particularly vocal in their anti-migrant rhetoric involving the popularization of the term Abahambe, which means foreign nationals should leave. More recently, we have seen groups such as March and March become increasingly organized, and also we've seen protests taking part in KZN and Gauteng. We've seen them a lot happening. What is concerning is that anti-migrant groups have increasingly moved beyond political statements and protest into people's everyday lives. Foreign nationals are often labeled as illegal regardless of the actual immigration status. And it poses the question of what makes a person actually illegal. Businesses have been targeted, schools have become a site of protest, and also communities have faced intimidation and violence. At this point, this has become more of a conversation about immigration policy. It has become a question of human rights and human dignity. Being a migrant or a refugee does not mean that a person loses their right to dignity, equality, or safety, and also protection from violence. And when people are targeted because of their nationality, when they're prevented from working, when they cannot access healthcare, when they are forced from their home, and also afraid to report crimes to the police, we have to ask ourselves, what does this say about the protection of human rights in our different communities? Tusimame Wanawake began receiving reports from migrant and refugee women who were experiencing these realities from Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. Women reported being unable to leave their homes, they lost their livelihoods, businesses, and also experience food inequality and struggle to access healthcare. I'm sure most people have seen on the media women who have been stranded outside of hospitals, women who are about to give birth, being denied access to healthcare. There were also reports of families fleeing from their homes because groups were moving through communities identifying foreign nationals. Some families ended up seeking safety in informal camps and public spaces, including, for example, the Malawian embassy, the Zimbabwean embassy, and also recently we saw at the Department of Home Affairs. Reports on the ground has also provided evidence that children and mothers who were repatriated were even separated, so they would rather send the mom to Mozambique and then they sent the mom to Malawi, which doesn't make sense because a child needs to be with their mother. Also, these experiences occurred during the coldest winter months, so looking from May to July. Women and children were sleeping outside in freezing conditions. People lost their belongings, diseases were reported, and families who had been previously self-sufficient became dependent on humanitarian assistance. For us, these experiences raised an important question. What does immigration look like from the perspective of the woman actually living through it? This is why Tusimame conducted this research across Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, and the Western Cape, including communities in Johannesburg, Pietermaritzburg, and several communities from Cape Town. So from the report, a lot of the respondents were from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Burundi, Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Somalia. So some of the findings that we saw was that 71% of the respondents have been living in South Africa for more than 10 years. 30% are self-employed, 27% reported losing their jobs because of threats. When asking about discrimination, approximately 65% reported experiencing discrimination because they are a foreign national, while 55% reported discrimination specifically related to immigration. This should make us pause, right? Because social cohesion cannot exist where communities are constantly being told that one group of people is responsible for the problems experienced by everyone else. At the same time, 70% of the respondents said that immigration is an important issue in South Africa. So clearly, immigration is a conversation that we need to have. But the question is, how do we begin to have these conversations? We can discuss documentation, we can discuss border management, employment, public services, and immigration policies without dehumanizing the people affected by these policies. We can have difficult conversations without turning migrants and refugees into scapegoats. And most importantly, we must recognize that refugees and women are not simply recipients of humanitarian assistance, they are workers, entrepreneurs, mothers, students, community members, and contributors to South African society. 75% of the respondents expressed a desire for greater government support for migrant and refugee women. That finding speaks to the need for stronger protection, greater access to services and institutions that respond to when women experience discrimination, violence, and exclusion. So Tusimame Mwanawake, like Matulu mentioned, is continuing to analyze the data and to develop a booklet that will document these experiences in greater depth. Our aim is not simply to produce the statistics, but it's also to ensure that the voices of migrant and refugee women are part of the national conversation on migration, human rights, and social cohesion. Because ultimately, behind every stat is a person, a mother, a daughter, a worker, a business owner, a neighbor. And regardless of where someone comes from, their dignity should not be conditional to their nationality. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marie-Claire, for presenting that in such a beautiful way. We have come to the end of our program, but we would like to end by inviting our host. If not for the host, we'll be having this meeting outside under the rain. But I'd like to invite our host, the Deputy Dean of the Transformation Committee of the University of Cape Town, Professor Jaya Raju. Please put your hands together as she gives us the closing remarks and the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Colleagues, I'm aware I'm standing between you and lunch. But you know, an inspiring event like this cannot end without some reflection and also a vote of thanks.
So good afternoon, colleagues, students, guests and friends. As we come to the close of this very inspiring Women's Day celebration, I'd like to take a moment to reflect on what we've experienced together today. This gathering has been more than a commemorative event. It has been a powerful reminder of the strength, resilience, creativity, and leadership of women across communities, cultures, and borders. Through stories, performances, conversations, and shared reflections, we have been invited to see, hear, and acknowledge experiences that are often overlooked. Today's event was made possible through the collaboration between the Humanities Faculty Transformation Committee and the African Feminist Studies Department. This partnership reflects the spirit of transformation and solidarity that is essential to building an inclusive university community. Thank you, Ala, Benita, I'm not sure if she's still here, for bringing us together in a space that encourages dialogue, learning, and collective action. A very special word of appreciation goes to the women of Tusimame Wanawaka. Thank you, Ms. Toluloka George, and the women of Tusimame Wanawaka for your presence, your courage, your generosity in sharing your stories and experiences with us. Through your remarks, you reminded us of the importance of community, dignity, and mutual support. Your video, though improvised, showed how empowerment is not simply a concept, but a lived practice that transforms lives and creates opportunities. Your work shows that inclusion flourishes when people are given tools, support, and the recognition they deserve. The sketch portraying the struggles of migrant women in South Africa challenged us to confront difficult realities. It reminded us of the many barriers migrant women face, including exclusion, vulnerability, and discrimination, while also highlighting their resilience and determination. Thank you for using art as a powerful medium to educate, provoke reflection, and inspire empathy. We extend our sincere thanks as well to the women of UCT who shared their reflections, their lived experiences, and insights. Your contributions strengthened the conversations we have had today and reminded us that transformation begins with listening, learning, and acting together. As we celebrate women, let us remember that honoring women means more than recognizing achievements for one day of the year. It means committing ourselves to creating spaces where all women can participate fully, be heard without fear, and flourish without barriers. It means standing up against discrimination, xenophobia, inequality, and exclusion in all of their forms. It means embracing transformation as an ongoing commitment rather than a one-off task, as espoused in the Humanities Faculty Transformation Vision and Approach. Before we conclude, it is my pleasure to offer heartfelt thanks to everyone who contributed to making this event a success. To the organizers from the Humanities Faculty Transformation Committee, Ala Alaruni, Bianca Teng, and Lee Brown, and the African Feminist Studies Department, Benita Moorman, Mujahid Osman, and Marlon Swai. Thank you for your vision, planning, and hard work. To the women of Tusimame Wanawaka, thank you for sharing your research, your talents, your experiences, your wisdom, and inspiration with us. To our speakers, performers, facilitators, and participants, thank you for your contributions and engagements. To all who attended today, thank you for being part of this collective moment of reflection, learning, and celebration. Finally, we extend our sincere appreciation to the Dean of Humanities for generously sponsoring today's gathering and for helping to create a welcoming space for fellowship and community. As we leave here today, may we carry forward the lessons, stories, and connections we have shared. May we continue to build communities rooted in inclusion, justice, compassion, and solidarity. And may we honor the legacy and contributions of women, not only today, but every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Raju. We appreciate your very kind words. Also, on behalf of Tusimami Wanawake, I would like to thank our director, first of all, the entire University of Cape Town team, and of course, Professor Ala, who we went back and forth many times. I'd like to thank Dr. Faisal, though he's not here. Our Nigerian-Ghanaian Jollof war is still on. I'd like to thank all the directors and every single one that has made it here, leaving your very busy schedules. I can't go one by one each name because I don't want to mess around with your names, but I want to thank every single person that made it here. I want to thank the Tusimami Wanawake women that are here as well. I'd like to thank Professor Benita. Thank you for working on the program with us. I'd like to thank everyone. We really appreciate you. And of course, Professor Raju has done all the things as well. Before we go, just 3 quick announcements. Please make sure that before you leave, you fill out the attendance form if you don't mind. So that when the book is ready, we can find you. So please fill out the attendance forms. It's circulating around. I'm not sure where it is now, but Mama Dolphin, could you please raise your hands and let them know who you are? So the beautiful lady behind there is, okay, and Kaylee, they've got copies, so please fill out the forms. Also, we're not allowed to eat in this place. We've got lovely food outside, but the gallery says we're not allowed to eat in the gallery. So we have to just eat our food outside on the corridor, if you don't mind. And then finally, the last announcement is, I'd like to thank our beautiful MC for emceeing us so wonderfully. Thank you so much. I was looking for you. I thought you were here. Thank you so much for emceeing us, for directing the program so beautifully. We really appreciate you. Thank you to all our partners who are here. The women have produced some things. Those are all the works of the women's hands. They've got lovely handbags, they've got nice things, and they've got things that they produced out of the Echo Hub, and they have a card machine. So please have a look at the back and see what the women have produced. You might be able to find some. I've bought a lot of things from them. In fact, I'm not buying anymore because I've spent too much money buying all sorts of beautiful and endurable things. So thank you all, everyone, for coming. We really appreciate you. We look forward to seeing you soon when we have the actual booklet. And we hope UCT will host us again and give us good food. Thank you. Travel safe and happy Women's Day to all of you.